I was raised in a family that was definitely pro-Israel. They were always talking to me about Israel. My maternal grandfather was a founder of AIPAC in Dallas. I'd been on a mission to Israel as a youth and really enjoyed it and just felt it as being a part of me. My involvement really stepped up, though, in 2006, when Hezbollah rained rockets down on over 1 million civilians, homes that I'd been to, people that I knew. I took it very personally, took it in a very different way. I always grew up with such pride within my generation. I was born post-67, of an Israel as a military might that had never lost a war. And now I see civilians being hunkered down into shelters for 30 days and children being moved to the south. And I said, I need to do more.
Kevin Paylett began looking for a way to combine his love of Israel with his people skills and his passion for politics.
I looked at AIPAC and what they did uniquely.
The United States will stand with Israel now and forever.
AIPAC really does have a unique and exclusive role as the voice of the pro-Israel community in building the U.S.-Israel relationship, and especially when it comes to Congress.
We are absolutely united when it comes to the U.S.-Israel relationship.
Regardless of party, Americans stand shoulder to shoulder in our commitment to Israel's security.
In order to have the most significant impact, Kevin focused on building personal relationships with up-and-coming members of Congress.
I follow politics like most people follow sports. The first political event I ever went to was for Congressman Pete Sessions, who was at the time the new congressman in my district in Dallas. And he's been a tremendous friend. Love visiting with Congressman Sessions and appreciate everything he does. But I'm one of so many calling on him that I sat back and said, gosh, there've got to be other elected officials who don't have so many friends in our community. And not only not that many Jews, but probably not that many pro-Israel activists.
Kevin reached out to Congressman Tim Scott of South Carolina.
And look forward to seeing you this weekend. So I was very excited with the opportunity to reach out to Tim and start visiting with him in Washington, D.C. in his office. I started to basically go through the process of hitting him with all of the issues and chose to say, you know what, let's take a step back. Let's just make a quick introduction, get to know him.
I first met him at an AIPAC conference, and then they came by the office.
It just continued to grow from a personal nature into this wonderful bond.
He understands the importance of our, not just a relationship with Israel, but a friendship with Israel, being not only our trading partner, not only an ally, but a true friend to our nation.
But Kevin didn't stop with educating new members of Congress on Capitol Hill. He set to work getting more friends engaged in AIPAC.
Kevin approached me, said, Michael, you have a lot of friends, you have a lot of passion. I'd like to see you become more involved in pro-Israel politics in AIPAC, an honor that I quickly accepted.
We needed more people, boots on the ground, giving club-level gifts, not only attending our annual event, but we needed influence makers, people that were connected to the community that could bring more to the table. Who will educate our leaders about Israel's true value? Our annual event the past 2 years has actually sold out. We had over 1,000 people each year.
This is officially the largest AIPAC event in Dallas history.
The great success for us has been on the club level as well. So a couple of years ago, I think it was 2 or 3, we sat at just over 100 club members, and today we're sitting at approximately 180 club members. People are needed now more than they've ever been needed, and there's a great opportunity for people to really make a difference in the U.S.-Israel relationship.
Kevin's days are full, but he keeps his eye on the future, building a better world for his children and teaching the next generation of pro-Israel activists.
There's a difference between that friend who's been there for you the whole way through and that friend who showed up once you had success. And
my 13-year-old daughter just had her bat mitzvah. During her speech, she talked about how very proud she was of her dad for everything he does on behalf of the Jewish community and the state of Israel through AIPAC.
He does inspire me to run for student council at my school and to help support Israel and to teach my kids in the future to support Israel.
Kevin and I have a legacy that we feel honor-bound and duty-bound to carry on. so that when our children and our grandchildren have reached the age of adulthood, there is a safe and secure state of Israel for them to call home.
Relationships do matter, and that means truly getting to understand people, where they're coming from, so that when you're coming in to lobby them, you've moved from organizer who comes once a year to citizen activist to friend citizen activist. I commit to AIPAC and to politics because I care deeply about the U.S.-Israel relationship. I can think for myself of no better way of living the spirit of Tikkun Olam. AIPAC gives me an opportunity to make a difference for America and Israel now, for my children, and for generations to come.
Ladies and gentlemen, Kevin Paylett. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome AIPAC National Board members Ted Cutler and Ed Levy.
Throughout his years as governor of my home state, I came to respect and admire Governor Romney, not just for his leadership, but for his friendship.
Mitt's father, Governor George Romney of Michigan, and my dad were very good friends. Mitt's brother, Scott, is a senior partner in the law firm that my father-in-law founded. And I met Mitt when he ran for governor of Massachusetts back in 2002.
Both Ed and I had the pleasure of visiting Israel with Governor Romney last year. This is a man who truly understands the security threats facing the Jewish state. We witnessed firsthand his obvious emotional connection to the land and to the people.
Watching him listen to Israelis, you could see how much he heard their concerns and understood the need for America to always, always stand beside Israel.
While every leader is aware of the threats, Mitt Romney feels them deeply to his core. He understands Israel's unique place as our nation's most valuable ally. In just a moment, we will have the pleasure of hearing from Governor Romney, who is in Boston today, campaigning, of course. After all, it is Super Tuesday. Afterwards, Governor Romney has been kind enough to agree to answer a few questions for some of our conference delegates who will be joining us on stage.
So now, it's our great pleasure to welcome via satellite our dear friend and Republican candidate for President of the United States of America, Mitt Romney.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the AIPAC Policy Conference today. And thanks to Teddy and Ed. They've been great friends and supporters and teachers over the years. I'm sorry that my Super Tuesday travel schedule prevents me from being with you in person, but while I can't be with you, I stand with you. I share your commitment to a strong and secure Israel, and I salute your tireless work to strengthen our alliance. This year, we're gathering at a dangerous time for Israel and for America. Not since the dark days of 1967 and 1973 has the Middle East faced peril as it does today. This is a critical moment. America must not, and if I'm president, it will not fail this defining test of history. The current administration has distanced itself from Israel and visibly warmed to the Palestinian cause. It's emboldened the Palestinians They're convinced that they can do better at the UN and better with America directly than they can at the bargaining table with Israel. As president, I'll treat our allies and friends like our friends and allies. In recent days and weeks, we've heard a lot of words from the administration. Its clear message has been to warn Israel to consider the costs of military action against Iran. I don't believe we should be issuing public warnings that create distance between the United States and Israel. Israel doesn't need public lectures about how to weigh decisions of war and peace. It needs our support. Israel's democratically elected leaders will always be welcomed and respected by my administration. Israel's current prime minister is not just a friend, he's an old friend. We worked together over 30 years ago at the Boston Consulting Group. He's a man whose intellect and courage I admire, and whose family sacrifice I profoundly respect. In a Romney administration, there'll be no gap between our nations, and there'll be no gap between our leaders. Now, I've seen Israel by land and by air. I've seen its narrow waist and its vulnerability to positions on the Golan Heights. I spent time with families in Sderot who've been terrorized by rocket barrages from Gaza. I've walked the streets of Jerusalem, and seen schools there that were pocked by rifle rounds that had been fired from some of the hills nearby. I would never call for a return to the indefensible 67 lines, because I understand that in Israel, geography is security. I've also studied the writings and speeches of the jihadists. They argue for a one-state solution, one all-dominating radical Islamist state, that is. Their objective is not freedom, it's not prosperity, it's not a Palestinian state, it is the destruction of Israel that they seek. And negotiating and placating such jihadists will never, ever yield peace in the Middle East. I recognize in the Ayatollahs of Iran the zealot refrain of dominion. Their passion for the martyrdom of Arab youth is matched only by their cowardice in avoiding it for themselves. Nuclear ambition is pursued by Iran to dominate, to subjugate, to obliterate. A nuclear Iran is not only a problem for Israel, it's a problem for America, and it's a problem for the world. Now, we may not know when Iran will secure sufficient fissile material to threaten the entire world, but the IAEA warns that that hour is fast approaching. In the Gulf, Iran prepares to close the Strait of Hormuz to hold hostage 20% of the world's oil. In their nuclear laboratories, they prepare the means to hold hostage the entire planet. Iran has long engaged in terrorism around the world. Most recently, of course, in Georgia and Thailand and in Washington, D.C., they plotted to assassinate the Saudi ambassador by bombing a Georgetown restaurant. Iran has deployed Hezbollah and Hamas and armed the insurgents of Iraq and Afghanistan, killing our sons and daughters. They war against America. Yet the current administration has promoted a policy of engagement with Iran. The president even offered to sit down with Ahmadinejad during his first year in office without preconditions. He was silent as Iranian dissidents took to the streets of Tehran, not wanting to disrupt the potential opportunity for dialogue with Iran's tyrants. The president not only dawdled in imposing sanctions, he's opposed them. Hope is not a foreign policy. The only thing respected by thugs and tyrants is our resolve, backed by our power and our readiness to use it. Of course, the administration's naive outreach to Iran gave the Ayatollahs exactly what they wanted most. It gave them time. Whatever sanctions they may now belatedly impose, Iran has already gained 3 invaluable years. As you know, there's some in the administration who argue that Iran's leaders are rational and that we can do business with them. The president speaks of common interests. Let me be very clear about this. We do not have common interests with a terrorist regime. Their interest is in the destruction of Israel and the domination of the Middle East. It's profoundly irrational to suggest that the Ayatollahs think the way we do or share our values. They do not. I will bring the current policy of procrastination toward Iran to an end. I will not delay imposing further crippling sanctions. I will not hesitate to fully implement the ones we already have. I'll make sure Iran knows of the very real peril that awaits it if it becomes nuclear. I will engage Iran's neighbors. I will station multiple aircraft carriers and warships at Iran's door. I'll stand with the Syrian people who are being mercilessly slaughtered. I know that the fall of Assad would not only be an important victory for liberty, but also a strategic blow to Tehran. As president, I'll be ready to engage in diplomacy, but I will be just as ready to engage our military might. Israel will know that America stands at its side in all conditions and in all consequence. Of course, our strength abroad depends upon our strength here at home. My economic plans will buttress our capacity to project power, and as president, I'll repair and strengthen our military. President Obama wants to shrink our Navy, shrink our Air Force, and shrink our contingent of fighting men and women. I'm going to expand every one of them. A military in retreat invites adventurism by the world's worst actors, just as we're seeing today. A strong and superior American military is the best ally peace has ever known. And I don't seek military superiority solely for the purpose of winning wars. I seek it to prevent wars. As president, peace will be my solemn goal. A peace not based on empty assurances, but on true security and defensible borders. This will require American strength and a demonstration of our resolve. That's why, as president, my first foreign trip will not be to Cairo or Riyadh or Ankara. It will be to Jerusalem. We will make clear to the world we're going to make it very clear. We're going to make it very clear that Israel's continued existence as a Jewish state is a vital national interest of the United States. I believe the right course is what Ronald Reagan called peace through strength. There's a reason why the Iranians released the hostages on the same day and at the same hour that Reagan was sworn in. As president, I'll offer that kind of clarity, strength, and resolve. In a Romney administration, the world will know that the bond between Israel and America is unbreakable, that our opposition to a nuclear Iran is absolute. We must not allow Iran to have the bomb or the capacity to make a bomb. Our enemies should never doubt our resolve, and our allies should never doubt our commitment. This is a critical time. AIPAC has a vital voice. Together, let's achieve peace for the region and ensure a secure future for Israel and America. God bless America, and God bless our friendship with Israel. Thanks so much.
Governor, thank you. Good morning. Now let's introduce our panelists. Please welcome a longtime AIPAC activist and National Council member from Tulsa, Oklahoma, Stacy Schusterman. A Republican County Commissioner from Gainesville, Georgia, Ashley Bell. From Carmel, Indiana, AIPAC activist Doug Rose. And last but not least, a student activist from the University of Southern California, Barry Golan Blaugrund. Let's go right to our first question. Stacy Schusterman.
Clearly, Governor Romney, as you addressed, the question on everyone's mind is the danger of Iran developing nuclear arms capability. Can you discuss further your plans to stop Iran?
Thank you. Yes, a number of things. First of all, we have to put in place a diplomatic isolation program, much that was put in place against South Africa during apartheid. I would indict Ahmadinejad under the Genocide Convention. I would make sure that their diplomats are rejected and despised throughout the world. I'd also make sure that we have communicated our credible military options. We can't continue to express a point of view that sounds like we're more concerned about Israel taking action against Iran than we are about Iran becoming nuclear. And so we have to develop our own military options and communicate them to the world. We also have to coordinate what we're doing with Israel and with our friends throughout the region to make sure that this is not something that has to be done without thought and comparison and coordination. As I mentioned in my earlier remarks, I'd also station 2 aircraft carrier task forces in the region, one in the Mediterranean, one in the Gulf, as well as other warships and other military capacities so that Iran can see that we're at their doorstep. And of course, we want to have crippling sanctions. Sanctions alone, however, have been ineffective so far. Of course, it took the president way too long to put in place crippling sanctions. And it was an extraordinary lost opportunity when the president failed to speak out for the dissidents. But I think we do need to communicate to the Iranian people the danger of them becoming a nuclear nation. Recognize, of course, that they need to understand that America is not going to sit by and watch Iran develop fissile material that could be used against us and against our friends in the region. We will simply not allow that to happen. Thank you.
Ashley Bell.
Good morning, Governor. Good morning, Governor.
Hi, Ashley.
A question is,
Hi, Ashley.
what is your plan to stop the Assad regime in Syria? And how can we get around Russian and Chinese intransigence at the United Nations?
Well, maybe one of the few bright spots in the Middle East developments in the last year has been the rising of the people in Syria against Assad. Obviously, as you know, Syria is Iran's only Arab ally in the region. Syria is the route that allows Iran to supply Hezbollah with weapons in Lebanon. Syria is Iran's route to the sea. So the significance of Syria perhaps distancing itself in some way from Iran is a very significant opportunity for us. And that's why we should be using every resource we have to encourage the movement within Syria to have a more representative form of government and to get rid of Assad. That includes communicating with the Alawites that there is a future for them in Syria, even if Assad is not there. It means working with Turkey and Saudi Arabia to make sure that the rebels have arms, that they're able to defend themselves and make progress against Assad. It also, I think it's essential for us to communicate that American action, military or otherwise, is not going to be determined or vetoed by China and Russia. That the United Nations has a role to play in the world, but they're not going to tell us what we do in order to protect our interests and to protect the interests of the people of Syria and to assure that Iran does not continue to have its sway in that part of the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck in Georgia today.
The next question comes from Doug Rose.
Good morning, Governor. What are your plans?
Hi, Doug.
Good morning. What are your plans, sir, your ideas, rather, to advance the Israeli-Palestinian peace process?
Well, that's a tough one in these conditions, of course, because you have questions about whether a unity government is going to be formed between Fatah and Hamas, and obviously if that were to occur, that has dramatic implications about the potential for discussions or negotiation. And then, of course, you have Egypt in tumult, Jordan feeling some fragility right now. You have Syria, of course, in tumult. And, I mean, talking about a peace process right now is a bit like setting up a tent in the middle of a hurricane. So there has to be some settling down of a number of questions, I think, before the peace process is going to get its legs again. The key course in a peace process is for the parties to understand where America stands. I think one of the president's biggest mistakes with regards to peace in the Middle East was confusing the Palestinians as to where America's interests and America's commitment stood. My view is we have to communicate that we stand with Israel. There's not an inch of distance between the two of us, and that allows the Palestinians to know that we will not allow them to pursue, either at the UN or anywhere else, this one-state solution which excludes a Jewish state. My view is we have to be clear. We stand with Israel. We don't insist that Israel makes unilateral concessions. Those have not worked in the past. That's not the right way to go. We're going to have things settle down and stand by our friend.
Thank you, sir.
Our final question from Barry Golan Blaugrund.
Good morning, Governor. Thank you for being with us. I know that you have traveled to Israel. What is something that stands out to you about the country and the people?
You know, my first trip was over a decade ago, I believe, and I went with a church group from my church and a group of friends. We went really to see the historic foundation of our faith and to see the historic sites. And you know, it's overwhelming to go to a place which has such extraordinary history. Then on my second trip, I was also struck by the extraordinary architecture and beauty. The Jerusalem stone, the fact that you have an entire city built with the same stone is just amazing. Then I came back on another trip, and the geographic characteristics of Israel struck me. Just how hilly and turned in the city of Jerusalem is upon itself. The idea of dividing a city like that seems impossible. The narrowness of the waste of Israel strikes you. But I think what strikes me most in these visits has been the passion and commitment and patriotism of the people. People are still immigrating into Israel. In Sterdot, when I met with people there and spoke with them about why they live there. I mean, to most people, they think they'd all leave. People stay there. There's a sense of purpose and commitment which is striking. And by the way, I have to mention Dan Senor, a friend who wrote that book with a colleague about Startup Nation. The commitment of people to innovation, to technology, to enterprise, to a dynamic economy. You know, all those things stand out as you visit Israel. Israel has, well, a lot of the great qualities I love about this country as well. We share beauty, we share passion, we share our commitment to our respective faiths, we share a dynamic economy, and we share values. I look forward to being a friend of Israel throughout my administration if I'm lucky enough to become the next president. Thank you. Thank you so much. Good to be with you today.
I want to thank our panel for joining us, and of course, Governor Romney. Thank you for joining us on this busy Super Tuesday.
Thank you.